Okay, today we're doing kind of intense stuff now because we're fighting the Greeks. And tonight we begin the fight in earnest. And what I've been doing this week is basically prepping us for the fight. And I don't think you were here yesterday, were you, Stephen?
No, I was yesterday.
So whatever, I was pretty strong yesterday in my approach. And I don't think it's going to change much until after Hanukkah. I'm normally the sweetest guy ever, but when you're fighting the Greeks, you got to fight with your sleeves pulled up, rip your gloves off, and start fighting.
Does Greeks represent secularism here, or what is it?
Not secular. Maybe secularism, not the secular. Maybe secular.
Like what it's
that was yesterday's discussion. Is what does it mean? What does it mean?
Right.
Who are the Greeks today? And maybe we'll cover it quickly a bit. It would be materialism, narcissism, just the focus on form, external form of things as the end of it all. Like, if you can't see it, you don't believe in it type people. They only believe in what they see. That's whole Westernism.
Like show me state.
What?
Like show me state.
Show me state. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do today is discuss the conscience. Today we're having an interesting discussion, and that's the conscience. Human beings are built with a vision of right and wrong. Human beings are born with a conscience. If you were born on some deserted island, like let's say you just were by yourself on a deserted island, and we found you 10 years later, and you're like, oh my gosh, you found me. And we're like, okay, let's go. And you're like, well, first let me show you around my little island here. You would have probably rules already set up. You would have developed some kind of taboo. There would have been the don'ts and the do's on your island. Some of them would have had reason. Some of them would have just been crazy. Like, because you walked that way that one day and a monkey threw a coconut on you. And you don't walk that way because, that way is bad or whatever. You would come up with your own moral system. Human beings always have a morality. What that moral system is, what the actual code of morality is totally arbitrary. If you're born on this side of the fence, you could believe in this. Born on that side of the fence, you believe what being good is, what being moral would entail is going to be a totally different criteria. So it's quite arbitrary what is right and wrong. But the fact is that every person's born with this right and wrong, without exception, to the point of when they do find someone in a very isolated situation, they usually have rules set up of right and wrong. Totally arbitrary right and wrong rules. It is, in a way, a proof of God that the human species has this. There's nothing inside of us that should have a moral voice. It doesn't make you more fit to survive, having a moral voice. In fact, you could even say the opposite would make you more fit to survive. If you didn't have your moral voice and you were purely survivalist, you'd probably do better than having a moral voice, which may actually turn you into a giver, which means you're going to have less. But there's
why is cooperation not a survival?
Well, cooperation is good societally, but not for the individual. And so there is a societal cooperation positive side, is that you help society in general. But as far as individual selfishness, it's a bit of a disaster. It's you and I know that that's the secret to creation. Secret to creation is sharing, because it's not. Maybe in the animal kingdom it's survival of the fittest, but in God's kingdom, the giver is the one who has the most. If you committed to this day to just be a giver, you would always have. God would just make sure you always had what to give. It's very rare I wind up without being able to give. Very rare. Normally I can give. And I don't even think about what I'm giving. I just give. And God makes sure I have, because I'm his clearinghouse for giving. Because we don't have much of a food chain with human beings. See, the lizard's probably good food for a vulture or something, or some other animal. So God gives the vulture the lizard. So on the human things, God can't just hand you freebies. So how do you get by? How do you survive? The answer is someone's got to give you. And all human beings have been very much on the take. Certainly their first decade and a half plus, maybe first 20 years, humans totally taking. And so you have to have giving, you have to have taking, you have to have a whole relationship of give and take in the human world. Because God can't do that direct, feed the iguana to the vulture. He's got to, it's got to come from human hands. And if you want to really see blessing in your life, just be amongst the givers. And then you'll really have, because God will consider you one of his main clearinghouses, one of his main distribution points. Okay? You can become a distribution point by being a giver. Clear? Yeah. So giving is where it's at. If you want great success, be a great giver. It also creates an energy called abundance. So if you're a giver, you're obviously feeling abundant. And people who have an energy of abundance have a lot higher chance of being hired for great jobs and stuff. People with abundance are the ones who likely will attract money into their lives. Because you're just about abundance. Your abundance for others and your abundance for yourself. You live in a world of abundance. Whereas people who live in a world of scarcity are usually stingy. And they themselves wind up often tight in their own finances. So that's, whatever, these are some secrets. Not our subject today. Our subject today is the conscience. Because human beings have a voice, a moral voice. And if they can't live with themselves because of they're not listening to the moral voice, they have been ignoring their compass that leads them through life. If they ignore their moral voice, human beings have negative emotions. It's as simple as that. You don't listen to your moral voice, you have negative feelings. These feelings are called basically conscience and guilt. Conscience says don't do it, so like if your bumper's about to hit a wall, in today's modern bumpers beep, so it's going like beep, 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 and then you're supposed to stop and pull away. But human beings, what happens, we have a beeper, don't do that, don't go there, right? You have a voice saying, don't go there. You hear that voice saying, don't go there, beep, 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 beep. And what happens when you live in a Western society, in a Greek society, that says, if it feels good, do it, which it had on Coke machines for like 2 years straight, it said on all the Coke machines, if it feels good, do it. If you live in a society that says if it feels good, do it, can you imagine if you only did what feels good, how much trouble you'd get yourself into? But that was they were just like saying, if it feels good, do it, which sells a lot of product, by the way. Sells a lot of product. If you can get people here thinking those words enough, if it feels good, do it. Okay, you don't immediately do it, but you keep seeing that enough times. If it feels good, do it. Nike just got rid of if it feels good. And they just cut right to the chase. Just do it. Just be impulsive. Just don't think it through. Just do it. Right? Judaism always says if it's the right thing to do, do it. It's the right thing to do. First check in. Right thing to do it. Not the right thing to do, don't do it. Okay? Coke says if it feels good, do it. Nike says just do it. Okay? So that's that little beeper, though. That's the Jewish thing. It's not just Jewish, it's anyone. Every single human being has a moral voice. So it may be a very skewed moral voice compared to Torah, but it's nevertheless for that society, it's their moral voice.
What about sociopaths?
So that's what a sociopath is. They ignore the moral voice. Sociopaths. Yeah. They ignore it, and they don't feel bad about it. That's why it's got a personality disorder connected to it. Okay, I think that's on the list of the 10 personality disorders, isn't it? Sociopath. Yeah, I think it's on the list. It's a personality disorder where someone just doesn't have that consciousness, and those people are very dangerous people because they just don't get it. We're all counting on everyone having a moral voice. We're counting on people feeling too guilty about doing something to us that they wouldn't be able to live with themselves, and therefore we can somehow trust that people. But a sociopath who can't link up bad behavior to his conscience. Yeah, those are dangerous people. But they do have tremendous. You should know that sociopaths have a great upside.
What's that?
They have a great upside. they push limits. Obviously, it usually winds up negative, but they are if they go right, I mean, if they actually do go the right way in life, and they're not disasters for society, but they're actually good for society type people, a sociopath will break ground in any field in a very interesting way, because they just don't care. And they're not waiting around for someone to pat them on the back. They're not waiting around for anything. They're just, I don't know how to explain it exactly. There's a reason why it's like, I can't remember why.
Psycho.
What?
He's an American psycho.
Is that an explanation? Is there?
He's an example of like a modern day sociopath. He's like very successful in the
Right.
business world.
Yeah, I
Extremely
was saying,
sociable.
they make the best floor traders.
Right.
When everybody's selling and you're buying, you're saying, I have utter contempt for my fellow human being, and you know what? That'll make you a lot of money, my friend.
Anyway, but
I know, it's sociopathological.
in various ways they're great. Another way they're great is Abraham was like the first sociopath.
Right. Right.
Abraham was like, the society was doing this, and he couldn't care less.
That's right.
It just didn't mean anything to him. So he's like, let's smash up what everyone thinks is important. It'd be like, what's that guy's name? Who's one of the guys who won the most Academy Awards? A Jewish guy. Spielberg. Like, imagine Spielberg comes down one morning to breakfast and he finds his daughter having made a bonfire out of all of his Academy Awards. You know, whatever, she's been on acid all night or something, and she like suddenly decided to sacrifice his Academy Awards in the morning, and he's like, what is going on here? And she's like, it's all meaningless, Dad. You know, it just doesn't mean anything. You know, that's Abraham. So they have a very strong place, sociopaths, in the, you know, if you just give them the right, because it's sociopathologically. When it comes to people, they lack pathology, what's the word, sympathy, and, you know, but when it comes to, it could be they have a very strong desire for truth. And they don't like the human constructs of what's called right and wrong. They want godly constructs. I met many a sociopath in the Torah world who were like, first of all, they didn't care what anyone in the Torah world thought of them, but they got to the Torah world because they didn't care what the secular world thought of them. They just don't care about social construction, social convention. So they just were like, to hell with that. You know, like, I want to know what's real. And they started digging, like deep sea drilling, like dredging up the world till they came to Torah, till they came to God in Torah. Wow, those are powerful people. They're leaders in the Torah world. I don't care what anyone thinks. They want what's right, even if it, in fact, they'd even enjoy sacrificing their name and face, their reputation, just to do something right in the face of everyone. Yeah, the conscience brings negative feelings. Now, these are also God things, meaning the fact that you have conscience is a godly thing. Animals don't have it. When a lion's about to jump on a deer, it doesn't like stop and say, oh, maybe this is wrong. Okay? There's no such thing. There is no morality outside of the human consciousness. And the human consciousness is a godly consciousness. If I could show it to you on a chart, I don't know if I have any pens here today. It looks like I do. So if I show it to you on a chart, so let's say this would be the highest use of the soul. This would be prophecy. This would be prophecy. This is just the use of the soul. Okay? Let's say this would be, that would be prophecy. Let's say this would be divine inspiration, which is called Ruach HaKodesh. This is like what Rashi had. Divine inspiration. Somewhere around there would be enlightenment. This is what people go to India for. It's halfway up the system. You know, it's a shame they go all the way to India for that when it's only halfway.
This is, whose system is this?
No, it's just use of the soul. This isn't a system. This is just, if you really used your soul and your body, Steve, turned into just a vehicle for it, and you just went for it and bolstered your soul and emboldened it, you would eventually you would get prophecy.
I see.
You could maybe get to divine inspiration. You could get to enlightenment.
What's enlightenment?
Enlightenment means there's no more selfishness. You realize all is one. So you and the table are the same. Someone steps on your toe, you'd say, you stepped on our toe. Our toe. That was our toe you stepped on.
So that's sort of the Okay, you can say that's the nullification of the ego.
Yeah, that'd be about halfway up.
Okay.
I mean, you can't jump to there without first having gotten rid of the ego. Okay, and there's various other levels. This would be, someone could be clairvoyant here. Clairvoyance.
What is this? Is this Kabbalah, or this model is from Kabbalah, or where did you get the model from? I'm just curious.
Oh gosh, no one's ever asked me that before. It's just.
Is your model?
Yeah, my model.
Oh.
It's just years and years of study. I'm studying, I'm emphasizing Kabbalah now for about 20 years.
That's your.
Yeah, so this is just me kind of translating use of the soul. Now, the very bottom, right down here, on the other side of that, right, I'll give it a zero soul connections. That's just like Mr. Gold's gym, I guess, or whatever. I don't know. That's not even a good example because he's probably spiritual too. But let's just imagine someone who's just, let's say it's Hitler, who he himself, this is a quote from Mein Kampf, I've come to eradicate the conscience, to eradicate the soul. He was there meaning the idea of soul. He said it was a Jewish invention, the soul was a Jewish invention.
It's really the idea of memory.
So he wanted to get rid of soul, meaning the idea of soul. He believed that it was anti-Darwinian.
Which is not even true. Like, didn't all the pagan people believe in souls too?
What's not true? That it's anti-Darwinian?
No, that it's that came from the Jews. I mean.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Anyway, but imagine someone. Let's just say that's Hitler. Okay, but once you come onto the soul system here, so what you have here is someone who doesn't use it but still hasn't repudiated it. He's not utilizing the soul, but he hasn't repudiated it. So you know what that's called here? It's called conscience. Sorry, my spelling's a little bad today. What's conscience?
Conscience. You know, in the path to just, he has this ladder in the very beginning. Purity leads to
Oh, yeah.
And then ends up with prophecy.
Oh, right. Yeah. You're
Just by Cordova, I think. Cordova.
Not Cordova.
Something like that.
Luzzatto.
Okay, Luzzatto. Another automobile. Yeah.
Luzzatto's an
I'm
automobile.
just saying, Cordova.
Sounds like
It's a joke.
Italian
I think he
automobile.
has that ladder of how one thing leads to the next.
When you listen to this, guys, when you totally ignore the soul, what you get in the end is conscience and guilt. And look at the average Westerner who's just living their Western existence. They still have conscience. They still have a voice saying, don't do that. It might be quite arbitrary of what they shouldn't be doing that they think is wrong. Then they ignore it because it feels good to do it. And then how do they feel afterwards?
Terrible.
Feel the guilt. Conscience and guilt. Most people, their lives are just conscience and guilt.
And rage.
In our world, in the Torah world, you don't live in conscience and guilt. You're way up higher than that. But what a shame. Like, if you got a soul, use it. Like, if what is your soul? Your soul is your fiber optic link out of this place. It's your chance for transcendence above the physical, mundane world. You want to use that baby. Yeah, you don't want to. It'd be like someone using a $6,000 French clarinet for a baseball bat. Like it's made for the most sensitive ears, for the most beautiful music. Yeah, and you're gonna you can also hit a ball with it. It could hit a ball. It's not gonna hit a ball like a baseball bat, but certainly a wiffle ball could slam a wiffle ball with an exotic clarinet, boutique clarinet. What a shame. So this is the way it's going with most Westerners. They just live, they're just doing their thing, going to get a beer, heading to Starbucks, going to work, going to watch television, going to check out Facebook, and they're just kind of conscious of guilt, kind of, are the only times that the soul gets to go like, meep, 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 still here, don't do that, meep, meep, don't go there, meep, meep. And then it's like, meep, and then you crash because it felt good or you just did it. And then, which everyone does, like it's un-American not to do it. Just do it, right? So you do it, and you feel like hell, can't peel yourself off the ground with a spatula, and And then you feel terrible. And what do you do now that you feel terrible? What do you do when you feel terrible? Shoshana, what do you think the average person does when they're feeling terrible about themselves?
Do something good.
No, not usually. They don't feel any connection anymore to good. They've lost their portion of good. What?
Drink some alcohol, do some drugs.
Excellent. And what do those cost? Money. They become consumers. Okay. Now, most people don't shoot right to the numbing agents. Most people start with maybe a new blouse, or they'll go for maybe an upgrade on an iPhone, or maybe they'll just put it all into a new car, or maybe a new winter coat. But they usually consume something. There's something about consumption that really works for, at least temporarily, for negative feelings. Consumption. And what happens is if it stops working, that's when they go for the numbing agents, which also is a billion-dollar industry. Alcohol is a gigantic industry. And it totally takes the edge off. Okay, so what we're going to do now is the history of the conscience. Okay, I'm sorry, the history of the aversion to the conscience. So what we're going to start with is pagan worship. That was what the Greeks were into. They were polytheists. So what they did was they basically had different gods to pay off. If you committed this kind of sin, you give an offering to that god. If you do this sin, you give an offering to that god. It's just a way to pay off your sins. So you did this wrong, you pay off that. You did that wrong. It's kind of like Persians building a synagogue. You know, you're going to build a synagogue for having, whatever you did. We'll just build a synagogue.
That's what they did.
I made a joke. It could be anyone, But it's just like I'll somehow work it off with, dedicating a synagogue to somebody or something like that. I don't want to say dedicating a synagogue has any connection to idol worship, but it's the same mechanism of a payoff. Like, I did whatever I wanted. I feel really bad about having done that, and I got to pay it off somehow. And so you had a god for every kind of sin who was appeased by the offering that you did. But all idolatry was payoffs in those days. They were payoffs. Clear? So it was kind of the original. I think the most famous way of dealing with guilt was idolatry. Later, there were other practices. Obviously, Judaism is the number one worst at dealing with guilt. Because first of all, our whole system creates a tremendous amount of guilt. You can do more wrong in 1 week, inadvertently, than a Gentile could do in their lifetime. I mean, we're the ones who came with the Torah.
Intention, right? Gentile with intention.
With intention. We're coming from Mount Sinai with a Torah that has 613 commandments, which breaks into 55,000 laws of how to keep them. Meaning that just how to keep them is 55,000 laws. And without even getting into rabbinic enactments or anything, we're just talking about how to do them. Breaks into 55,000 laws. Rambam lists them all in his magnum opus, the Mishnah Torah. So to really keep the whole Torah, you need to know those 55,000 laws. We are a disaster when it comes to this because our tradition creates lots of guilt and we have no payoff. There's no way you can pay it off. You can do teshuvah. You can basically right your wrong by doing the 4 steps of teshuvah, which is number 1, stop doing it. 2, say you did it. 3, to God, not to anyone else. Say you did it. 3, express your regret for having done it. And 4 is to commit to never doing it again. It's not the hardest thing to do. It can be a bit painful to do it. But the idea is just to own it. You got to really own what you did. And obviously commit to never doing it again. Otherwise, it's not exactly real. Clear? We kind of fell upon the pagan world. But what I'd like to jump to is science. Darwin and Darwinism and that whole world of we are advanced algae, which I was actually taught in school as a kid. But this idea of evolution, but not the evolution that's probably the way it worked, but the evolution of like algae grew tails and became fish, which grew legs, which became amphibians, which became lizards, which became, that whole thing. So that was, and it looks cool, works cool, it goes exactly according to the Torah, and Torah itself says, first there was water, then there was land, then there was vegetation, then there was fish and fowl and animals and then humans. I mean, it goes exactly according to evolution. So obviously it works somewhat logically, the evolution thing. But this whole Darwin paleontology move is another chess move in assuaging guilt. Because if you can somehow convince yourself that you're just advanced algae, you don't have to worry about the conscience. The conscience is just a figment of your imagination, and you can better ignore it.
Why is that?
Why? Wait, what was the statement? I'm sorry,
What are you reading? If you're just advanced algae, so then you don't have to feel bad.
I see.
Meaning, algae is not supposed to feel bad about having just done something really stupid.
Well, nobody says that we're advanced algae. We say the brain has evolved, and new parts of the brain have evolved that allow for questioning about meaning.
I understand that. No, of course, but there's an aspect, and this is what Hitler really jumped on in his work as a social Darwinist, is that you're right. I understand,
yeah.
but it is a move to say we're not these created beings with these godly souls that have to own that relationship with the Creator. It's that we are just highly developed algae, and therefore you don't really have to own it. I mean, you have to own it on an existential level, meaning if you believe, for example, don't do unto others as you wouldn't want done to you. Any humanist can come up with that one. And now you have a bit of a moral voice inside of you from that basic tenet of what's hurtful for you, don't do to others. You can have that. There were various other ways of dealing with guilt, but one of those was, as we spoke about, was social Darwinism. And Hitler's whole move was basically to destroy the idea of conscience. That didn't really go anywhere. Post-war began a major consumerism. It's still here, but there's a level of consumerism after the war like never before. Later, they got the whole credit thing and hedging finances on being able to, after a while you could buy a very expensive thing with very little money down, and just consumption became kind of the next bandage for conscience, which we spoke about before, is you can just go buy something, feel better. What happened was the consumerism stopped working. Consumerism stopped working. Let me just give you an idea how that looks. Oh, it's after 4. I can't show it to you on a chart right now, but basically, how much time we have? 5? So let me just show you how consumerism went. It went like, basically like this. You have trying to get, originally you tried to get something, you got it, and then eventually you had what's called the law of diminishing returns on the other side, where it would get old until you want something else, and you'd try to get that. And that's the way life looked. Today, with modern consumerism, you can get what you want very quickly, unless, of course, it's a university degree or something. You can get something very quickly, yeah, and with very little money down. And then you get, the law of diminishing returns, right? Now, of course, you can get something else very quickly, too. And then you get the law of diminishing returns. And this is consumerism, where you just keep, getting more and more stuff. See that? So you're just constantly sliding down what you had just gotten while you're going for something else. Now, something goes wrong here. See, in the old days where you just tried to get something for like 3 decades and then you got it, and then, it got old. So you notice the first thing you go for is exciting and fun. The second thing you go for, you actually pass your downslope of something else. The third thing you go through, you cross 2. The fourth thing you go through, you cross 3. Next thing you go through, you cross 4. And what happens is, it gets hard to fool yourself that the stuff you want is going to actually do what it promises to do for you. You understand? As you're actually going for something today, you're in mid-process of coming down, possibly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 diminishing returns of something you already went for. This is devastating to one's desire. See, the key to desire, when you first wanted that one thing, nothing was going to stop you. You had pure desire. When you have pure desire, you get it. Life is all based on desire. Everything in life is desire. So you want it, you want to get it, yeah? But when you come over here, so you still want something, but you keep passing the letdown of many things that you've had within the last day, possibly. It could be in the last hours. It could be the last 3 days. But you're passing through the stuff you already got, and it lost its luster soon after. And what happens is that consumerism isn't working very well. And so what's left when consumerism doesn't work to make us feel better about our ignoring the conscience, what's left? You guys tell me, what do people do? Someone mentioned it a bit earlier. Shoshana mentioned it a bit earlier. Yeah, so it's medicate. She mentioned alcohol, but there's all kinds of ways to medicate without buying any alcohol whatsoever. But it's a whole medicate society that people live in today. And that's kind of the modern answer. That was once idolatry, Christianity, Darwinism, Hitlerism, social Darwinism. Today is then consumerism.
Now it's numb.
Yeah, now it's medicate. Because when we do the wrong things, we feel lousy. And when we do the right things, we feel great. Whenever you do the right thing, you always feel good. You can turn that off. When you do the right things, you feel good. When you do the wrong things, you feel lousy. So it sounds like a perfect and easy recipe in life. Just do the right things. What are the right things? So you got to check it out. Like, is Torah the right things? What everyone has a right and wrong. The question is, what's the proper criteria? Is Torah the criteria for right and wrong? And that's something everyone has to investigate to see what is the actual right and wrong of life. But one thing's for sure: if you honor it, you feel good. If you ignore it, you feel bad. And we're here to feel good. Like, that's what we came to this world for. Every human being wants to feel good, but they think they're going to feel good while ignoring their conscience. So when we light those Chanukiahs tonight, let's light it in honor of Hashem, in honor of Torah, in honor of doing the right things in a world in a world that it would rather ignore the conscience. Let's do it in a world that is after the good. Shalom.